I know that I am temporarily disadvantaged in this argument that I've made, that I've been making, that I'm probably going to continue to make, at least for a day or so, or for however long this is in the news cycle. But I am right. It doesn't make me wrong just because the politics favor someone else right now in this kind of honeymoon sugar phase of events. I am talking about the $1,400 in basically the COVID bill that's going to pass, or that's already been passed, and that the items or elements of that bill being enacted, the one specifically that people are probably going to be most familiar with because it directly affects them, is the $1,400. Now, 17 million people were ripped away from getting the $1,400. And initially, if you remember, this was supposed to be $2,000 that got whittled away to $1,400 and then whittled away further to a small contingent of the American population getting those checks, under the belief that a person who's making $70,000 or $80,000 doesn't necessarily need it. The point was to put money back into the economy, and a person who's making $70,000 or $80,000, depending upon where they live, is not the same. Let's just put it that way. If you're living in California, oh my God, that is not necessarily a huge amount of money. But regardless, whatever. $1,400 is going out. They're chest thumping it as a win, and they're going to go out and sell it. Joe Biden believes that part of the problem with Obama's plan was that they didn't sell it hard enough. They didn't give the politics. They didn't put enough propaganda out, making sure that people hear how good the plan is. Well, Joe Biden is going to celebrate this. He's going to chest thump this. And you have to give him credit, because there's basic politics here that he's doing quite well. What they said, do basic things well. Well, Joe Biden has done basic things well. The $1,400, he got his bill passed, despite the fact that the bill didn't have the key element that was supposed to be in that bill, which is a $15 an hour minimum wage. That's the thing that he told the American public. But put that to the side for the moment. What the news media is going to report, what his media sources are going to report, is that Joe Biden basically said he was going to get his bill passed, and he's got his bill passed, despite the fact that all these sorts, the provisions were whittled down or weren't a part of the bill. It doesn't matter. That's not going to be the way it's reported. It's going to be reported as a fixture, as a thing unto itself, his bill. The public may look at the $1,400 and the $2,000 as being a election tax. Meaning they may say, all right, look, we didn't expect him to be exact on the 2000. And we anticipate that just in the context of politics, that there's a whittling down effect of whatever the person said he's going to get. So the 2000 gets whittled to 1400. Okay, fair enough. As long as I wanted the 1400, that's not a big deal. So the public could give him a pass on that at the end of the day, especially when the checks are in their hands. And Joe Biden is making sure that those checks go out immediately. You don't believe me? Those checks are supposed to be hitting people's bank accounts as soon as this weekend, like tomorrow.
People can expect to start seeing direct deposits hit their bank accounts as early as this weekend. This is, of course, just the first wave. People can expect to start seeing direct deposits hit their bank accounts as early as this weekend. This is, of course, just the first wave.
If Psaki is not enough for you, if you're like, yeah, I don't necessarily entirely believe her, well, here's Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, basically saying the exact same thing.
We're working hard first to get the direct payments out, the $1,400 checks or direct deposits. Americans will begin seeing those show up in their bank accounts this weekend. We're working hard.
The sad part about this is that these are pennies. $1,400 is not a huge amount of money. And I get that this is aimed at people who are making, what's 70 to 80,000. But even for people making 70 to 80,000 or less, this is not a lot of money. How much do you pay for rent? How much do you pay for your car note? And at the end of the money from the standpoint of a rent, a car note, how much of this $1,400 will exceed your rent in your car note. So I hope you understand that's where I'm coming from this at. And the reason and my angst and animosity against this is because this is not a situation where Democrats were negotiating with Republicans and they negotiated the bill down. If it's a victory, who did they beat? The Republicans didn't have any power in this process. Democrats were basically negotiating themselves down. So much so as basically saying to the American worker, they're not worth $15 an hour. The Republicans weren't even part of the conversation. The Democrats did it all on their own. But nevertheless, the focus is not going to be on the $15 an hour that was missed. The focus is going to be on $1,400 in people's bank accounts. And that's going to be what is screamed. The people who are at that middle range, that's the problem that I have with these kind of piecemeal plans. Because there are going to be people who are in those middle ranges that get screwed over royally. Meaning the guy that's making $80,000 versus the guy that's making $79,000. Is that $1,000 really that big of a difference? Well, one person should get it and the other person shouldn't. And can't you do that up until a certain point where it becomes very subjective on who should get what? I do say, though, that the people who should get it should be people who are going to basically spend it. But that can go all the way up into over 100,000 who would basically get that money and drop that money immediately into something, which is kind of the point of what it is supposed to be used for. There's another point that we need to consider, meaning the fact that he cut it to $1,400 may not be a huge demerit in the way that I think the left may be thinking of it. The rest of the population may actually accept the fact that he's willing to do that. So we'll see. On the other part, Biden had to have this queued up already. For all of them to be able to come out and say, yes, we're going to send this immediately. That means that it was already queued up. They basically had everything primed, knowing that the bill was going to pass, knowing that they were going to at least get $1,400. And so at the point where everybody signed the bill, Joe Biden just, bing, everything kicks off. And so the public says, wow, Joe Biden got me the $1,400. This is two things that Joe Biden has done right. He's gotten the COVID bill passed, which, yes, it didn't have everything in it, but for the moment, suspend belief on that part and just deal with the fact that he got it passed, something that says COVID bill, and something that people can say, okay, that's a win in the way that people would consider him getting it across. He's doing the vaccines appropriately, meaning the vaccinations is going above schedule. So when Joe Biden first made the proclamation of, okay, we're going to have this many vaccines out the first time around, he probably gave himself a huge amount of cushion. So the next time that he comes out, when he knows a little bit more about how fast the vaccines are going to come out, he can say, yes, we beat schedule. And not only did we beat schedule, by July, we're going to have enough vaccinations, or by, I think you say either May or July, that everybody can be vaccinated. That's a win. And that's a win from the standpoint of competence. Meaning he got in office, he started to manage the vaccinations, and the number of COVID deaths started to go down. And it makes it look as if he was able to do his job as president in managing the number of COVID deaths and bringing down the crisis and simultaneously getting out the vaccinations. That's just basic competence. If Donald Trump would have did that with basic competence, he'd be president now. I hope you understand what I mean. When I say a ham sandwich could have did a better job than Donald Trump, this is kind of what I mean. You could have put a ham sandwich in there, and if they would have just did basic due diligence of what's in the best interest of people not dying in massive numbers in order to try to keep the numbers down, do that. Donald Trump was so interested in the economy and less interested in Americans that, yeah, those numbers started to basically go up. He gets 2 points for those two things. But the fact that Joe Biden gets points for those two things and that people may give him a pass immediately. And like I say, I might be temporarily disadvantaged in this argument. But at some point, that $1,400 sugar high is going to go away. At some point, that person is going to get his pay. And there's going to be millions, tens of millions of people who make under $15 an hour. and no longer holding on to the 1,400 is going to look at their paycheck and they're going to realize they've been betrayed. Not every person is going to get it. And even the people who don't necessarily get it, every day that they go without having $15 an hour is a day that the Democratic Party has basically betrayed them. I get that they're passing a $1.9 trillion stimulus, and you've seen my arguments as to why this is insufficient in regards to what needs to take place. 500,000 Americans have died. And those Americans that have died were basically the poor and the middle class that were making under the $15 an hour, that had to go out there and work to ensure that people like you and me and Joe Biden and other people who needed food and groceries and everything else got those groceries. Heroes! They're heroes! And yet, now that they're not our heroes anymore, because we don't need them to be, now that the numbers are going down, Democrats will go in and turn their backs on those heroes that they said was making a starvation wage, and will literally leave them with that starvation wage despite having the power to do something about it. Every dollar less than $15 an hour, for every day that it is less than $15 an hour, screams out at the level of betrayal. And whatever value you want to give that, manufacture that to tens of the millions of Americans that are stuck in that situation of a starvation wage, trying to raise the kid, because the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, didn't care enough, didn't believe that the American worker was worth $15 an hour. Not only wouldn't fight for it, wouldn't even push in the least for it. You just said it. I don't know if you lied. I don't know if you just didn't have it in you to push for it. Either way, I am making the point that that is another betrayal. And even though that betrayal may not be felt right now with the $1,400, just because you've engaged in good politics from the standpoint of competence, and the media is basically giving you beautiful coverage and these glowing lights, it doesn't mean that you haven't betrayed the American working class, and that working class, whether they realize it or not, every day that they make less than $15 an hour is a day that, whether they know it or not, they've been utterly betrayed by the Democratic Party. And that $1,400 in no way makes up for that reality. Not everybody is going to get that $300 or whatever. You have some people who are just working and making the $11 an hour, $12 an hour, $8 an hour. What would their lives look like with that $15 an hour? And by the way, when they're postulating all of this stuff about this bill is going to do this and that, in the document that these guys were putting out, it includes the $15 an hour. So for all of the protestations of, oh, this is going to eliminate poverty and this is going to do that, it includes the $15 an hour. And the fact that that is not included in the bill makes those pronunciations dodgy at best. Joe Biden needs to explain to the American public how he plans to give them $15 an hour without getting rid of the filibuster, without pushing the parliamentarian to basically allow the provision to go through, without pushing the people on his side like the Joe Manchins of the world. If he is not willing to push nor use the bully pulpit, then he needs to explain to the American public how he's going to do it. Otherwise, this is an utter betrayal. The Democratic Party needs to explain why it hates the American worker so much, or believe that they are so lazy or so undeserving of a living wage. That's what they need to explain. And so despite the fact that this passed, and despite the fact that they're getting this check out blissfully fast, and despite the fact that I would admit this is extremely good politics, at some point, the sugary high will wear off. And that person will be sitting there with their paycheck, and that inadequate paycheck that in no way make ends meet. And it's going to be the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, House and Senate to blame. They had the opportunity to do something about it. They chose not to. None of them, all of them are at fault. They chose not to help when they had the opportunity. So, yeah, good job on getting the checks out. good job on the politics. But when those people are sitting there with their checks and those checks are inadequate, Joe Biden is the person you need to thank. Like I said, temporarily disadvantaged. Give it a month. Give it 2 months at the most. Meet me back here with this particular argument, and you'll feel what I'm saying in regards to this was an utter betrayal. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.